Hi Taurus, welcome in. Get comfortable for a moment, take a slow breath, and just settle into the energy with me. Take what resonates and leave the rest. Okay Taurus, the first card sitting here is the Devil, and immediately, I'm getting this feeling of someone who has been trying very hard to resist something they actually feel quite deeply. It doesn't feel simple. There's attraction here, there's attachment, but underneath all of that, there seems to be fear. Almost like this person has been fighting with themselves more than they've been fighting with you. And look at this. The Nine of Wands comes right beside it. Yeah. Somebody has their walls all the way up. I keep sensing a person who may have created distance, become harder to read, or suddenly started protecting themselves emotionally when the connection began feeling too real. For some of you, you may have wondered whether this person stopped caring. Maybe their actions made you question everything because one moment you could feel them close to you, and the next moment they seemed completely unavailable. But here comes the Knight of Cups, and this changes the emotional tone of what I'm seeing, because underneath those walls, there still appears to be feeling. There's something they haven't completely disconnected from. It feels like their heart has been pulling them one way, while their fear keeps pulling them somewhere else. And Taurus, you may have felt that contradiction without ever receiving an explanation for it. Maybe that was one of the hardest parts. You could sense something between you, but you couldn't build anything solid around it. You may have been waiting for their actions to finally match what you were feeling from them, and every time it seemed like they might open up, something pulled them backward again. Oh my God, and here comes the Tower. This feels like there was a moment when everything became unstable very quickly. For some of you, it may have been an argument, a sudden withdrawal, a separation, or simply a decision from this person that caught you off guard. For others, it could have been slower than that. Maybe the connection gradually became impossible to hold together because you were doing too much of the emotional work. The Devil beside the Tower makes me feel that this person may have contributed to that instability through their own patterns. Pride, avoidance, fear of vulnerability, perhaps even trying to convince themselves that they didn't need this connection as much as they actually did. I don't necessarily feel that they understood what they were doing while they were doing it. It feels more like somebody reacting from old defenses and realizing the consequences afterward. And Taurus, there's something about your energy here that feels tired of guessing. You can be patient when something matters to you. You can give people room. You can wait for something meaningful to grow. But patience is very different from carrying an entire relationship on your shoulders, and I feel some of you reached a place where that distinction became impossible to ignore. The Five of Pentacles is coming through, and this feels lonely. It may have left you wondering why somebody who seemed to care could make you feel so emotionally left out. Maybe you weren't asking for perfection, you just wanted consistency. You wanted to know that if you were investing your heart, somebody was actually standing there with you. What's interesting, though, is that this Five of Pentacles doesn't only feel like your experience anymore. I keep getting the sense that the distance they created may be starting to feel very different from their side. What once gave them control or emotional protection may now feel like absence. Because the Knight of Cups is still sitting here. Those feelings didn't necessarily disappear just because this person became quiet. If anything, it feels like silence gave them more room to notice what they were trying not to feel. And this is where the energy begins to shift, Taurus, because somebody who spent so much time protecting themselves may finally be looking at what that protection actually cost them. There's something they're beginning to understand about what they had with you, and I don't think that realization is sitting comfortably with them. The Hierophant is coming through here, and this feels like a much deeper lesson than simply missing somebody. There's something about this connection that may be forcing this person to look at how they actually show up when something meaningful is placed in front of them. It feels like they're beginning to recognize the difference between wanting someone and actually knowing how to build with them. Those are two very different things. The Six of Pentacles is sitting beside it, and, yeah, this feels important. I keep sensing that they're looking back at the balance between the two of you. Who was giving? Who was waiting? Who was making room? Who kept trying to understand the other person? For some of you, they may be realizing that you gave them more patience than they gave you certainty. You may have offered emotional space, understanding, second chances, or simply time, while they remained unsure about what they were willing to offer in return. There's a quiet accountability showing up here. Not necessarily somebody announcing, "I was wrong," but somebody privately seeing things they weren't willing to see before. The Hierophant feels almost like life itself has become the teacher in this situation. Distance can do that. When somebody no longer has immediate access to your presence, they sometimes begin noticing all the little things they once assumed would always be there. Oh, look at this. 9 of Pentacles. Your energy feels very different here. There's something calmer about you. More self-contained. You may be putting your attention back into your own life, your work, your home, your routines, your peace. Maybe you're taking better care of yourself emotionally. Maybe you simply stopped checking whether this person was going to make a move. And strangely enough, that shift may be speaking louder than anything you could have said. I don't feel you necessarily doing this to get a reaction. It feels more like you reached a point where waiting became too expensive emotionally. You started remembering that your life still moves, even when somebody else cannot make up their mind. And the Magician comes out here, and this person may be thinking about whether there is still something they can do. I'm getting someone mentally going through different possibilities. What could they say? How could they approach you? Is there still an opening? Could they somehow create another opportunity? But there's hesitation around that, because they're not looking at the same version of you anymore. The 9 of Pentacles feels like somebody they can't simply return to with the same old behavior and expect the same response. You may still care. You may still have questions. Some of you may even still feel that connection very strongly. But there's a difference between having feelings and abandoning your standards because of those feelings. Okay, 5 of Cups. There it is. This feels like regret beginning to settle in. Not dramatic regret for everyone, but that uncomfortable realization that something valuable may have been mishandled. They could be remembering conversations differently, thinking about moments when you needed more from them and they didn't step forward, remembering times when they could have been clearer, more consistent, more emotionally present. For some of you, they may have believed there would always be more time, another conversation, another chance, another moment when they could finally decide what they wanted. But your energy doesn't feel like it's waiting in that same place anymore. And I think that's what makes the 5 of Cups hit differently. Because this may not only be about missing you, it feels like they're beginning to understand what your presence actually offered them. Stability, loyalty, a sense that something could have become real if both people had been willing to nurture it. There's also something humbling about the Hierophant beside the 5 of Cups. This person may be learning that meaningful connections require more than chemistry. They require choices. They require showing up. They require giving something back. And the more you settle into your own value, the harder it may become for them to pretend that what happened between you meant nothing. What catches my attention, though, is where your energy seems to be moving from here. Because while they're looking backward at what they could have done differently, you appear to be looking toward a very different direction. And that may be the moment when the fear of truly losing you begins to become real for them. There's an 8 of Cups coming through, and this feels quieter than I expected. I'm not seeing someone storming away or trying to prove a point. It feels more like an internal decision. That moment when you realize you've spent enough time trying to understand something that refuses to become clear, and you start choosing peace instead of another round of questions. For some of you, this may be happening very gradually. You may still care about this person. You may still think about them. There could even be days when part of you wonders what would happen if they suddenly reached out. But emotionally, something is changing. You're not organizing your life around the possibility anymore. And that matters, because I keep sensing this person was accustomed to feeling your energy there. Maybe you were the one who kept the door slightly open. Maybe you were usually willing to listen, forgive, understand, or give them more time. Even if there wasn't constant communication, they may have carried this quiet assumption that the connection wasn't really going anywhere. Oh my God, the tower just came out again. This feels like the realization that their assumption may have been wrong. Something could suddenly make the distance feel real to them. It doesn't necessarily have to be a dramatic event. Maybe you stop responding in the same way. Maybe they notice that you're genuinely focused elsewhere. Maybe they simply wake up one day and recognize that your energy isn't reaching toward them anymore. There's a difference between somebody giving you space and somebody beginning to detach, and I feel like they may be starting to sense that difference. The Page of Pentacles is here, and I'm getting this awkward little energy of wanting to test the waters. Almost like someone thinking, could I still talk to them? Would they answer me? Is there still a way in? It doesn't feel like a grand declaration. Not yet. This page feels careful, maybe even nervous. For some of you, this person could consider sending something simple, something that looks casual on the surface, because they don't know how safe it is to reveal what's underneath. But before anything happens, Temperance comes in. Okay, this is beautiful, because there's something very calming around how they remember you. You may have been a grounding presence in their life, without realizing how much that affected them. Maybe conversations with you made things feel quieter inside them. Maybe you had a way of bringing them back down when their thoughts were everywhere. Perhaps there was simply a comfort around you that they didn't appreciate fully while they had access to it. And once that comfort isn't readily available anymore, they may begin noticing its absence. Temperance also makes me feel that you're becoming less interested in emotional chaos. You may be protecting your peace differently, not through anger, not through punishment, but by becoming more selective about what gets access to you. Yeah, that changes the entire dynamic. Because here comes the World. There's something about this card that feels like a door approaching its natural closing point. Not necessarily locked forever, but you're no longer standing there holding it open for somebody who can't decide whether they want to walk through. I keep sensing that this is where their anxiety may deepen. They could begin wondering whether your silence means more than they thought, whether you're meeting someone else, whether you've emotionally outgrown the connection, whether they waited so long that they no longer get to decide how this story continues. For some of you, they may have assumed they could return whenever they were ready. The World challenges that assumption. Your life has continued, your perspective has changed, and whatever happens from here, you may need something very different from what they offered before. There's almost this image of them standing outside something they once had easy access to, suddenly realizing they may have to knock. And with that Page of Pentacles still sitting here, I don't think the idea of reaching out is disappearing from their mind. If anything, it may be becoming harder to ignore. The question is whether they remain trapped in hesitation or finally decide that silence is a bigger risk than saying something. Death and rebirth is coming out here, and this feels like something inside this person can't remain exactly as it was. There's a shift happening beneath the surface, and I don't think it's comfortable for them. It feels like they're being pushed to confront an old version of themselves, the version that could hide behind pride, delay difficult conversations, or assume there would always be another opportunity later. Something about that approach doesn't seem to work anymore. And right beside death and rebirth, we have the Two of Cups. Okay, this is where the emotional energy becomes much harder to dismiss. I'm getting the sense that whatever distance exists between you, this person may still feel a very specific connection to you. They can distract themselves. They can stay busy. They can tell themselves they should leave things alone, but that doesn't necessarily resolve what's happening emotionally. For some of you, they may be asking themselves whether the connection deserves another conversation, not whether everything can magically return to what it was, because I don't feel that's the point. It feels more like, is there something here that I never handled properly? Is there something I still need to say? Oh, and the Page of Pentacles is showing itself again. That's interesting, because this energy feels small, careful, almost deliberately ordinary. I wouldn't necessarily expect somebody to arrive with a huge emotional confession immediately. This could look like a simple message, a question, a check-in, maybe something that gives them an excuse to see how you respond. Hey, how have you been? I was thinking about you. Maybe even something more casual than that. But underneath that simple approach, there may be much more happening than they're willing to reveal right away. The Page of Pentacles feels like someone placing one small thing on the table and watching carefully to see whether you accept it. And I feel your energy looking at that very differently than you might have before. Because here comes the Ten of Pentacles. Yeah, this is where I feel your standards speaking louder than your emotions. Chemistry may not be enough anymore. Missing each other may not be enough. Even an apology, while meaningful, may not automatically rebuild what became unstable. You may quietly be asking, what are you actually offering me? Not in a material sense, I mean emotionally, practically, consistently. Can this person communicate when things become uncomfortable? Can they stay present instead of disappearing behind their defenses? Can they create something that feels secure instead of leaving you constantly wondering where you stand? Those questions matter because the Ten of Pentacles doesn't feel interested in temporary intensity. And look at this, Ace of Cups. There is still softness here. For some of you, your heart may not be completely closed to this person. That doesn't mean you're going backward. It doesn't mean you automatically say yes if they return. It simply means feelings can exist alongside boundaries. You can care about somebody and still require them to meet you differently. I actually feel that distinction very strongly. Death and rebirth with the Ace of Cups feels less like repeating the old relationship and more like asking whether something genuinely different could be created from what remains. Because if this person approaches you exactly as they did before, you may recognize very quickly that nothing has changed. But if their behavior begins to match what they're saying, that may give you something real to consider. The Two of Cups is still sitting between these cards, and it almost feels like two people seeing each other again without being able to pretend the past didn't happen. There may be attraction, there may be tenderness, there may even be relief, but there are also unanswered questions sitting in the room with you, and perhaps that's exactly how it needs to be. Because this time, the connection may have to earn its way forward instead of surviving on potential. I keep looking at the Ten of Pentacles because it feels like the real test isn't whether this person reaches out. The real test may be what happens after that first message, after that first conversation, after the emotions begin opening again, and the cards coming behind this are making me wonder whether they're finally prepared to offer something more substantial, or whether you're going to realize that your heart has already learned to ask for more. The Two of Cups is coming forward again, and I really like where it lands, because this doesn't feel like a card asking you to forget yourself for the sake of a connection. It feels much more balanced than that. Two people can have feelings for each other, they can recognize something meaningful between them, and still have to decide whether they're actually capable of meeting each other in a healthier place. The Hermit is right beside it, and I'm getting someone who has spent quite a bit of time inside their own head. Maybe they've been replaying choices, conversations, moments when they could have handled things differently. There's a solitude around this person that feels necessary somehow, not punishment, more like life removing the noise, long enough for them to hear themselves clearly. For some of you, they may finally be recognizing patterns that had very little to do with you. Their hesitation, their tendency to pull away, their fear of being vulnerable. Those things may have existed long before this connection. And perhaps being separated from you forced them to sit with those parts of themselves instead of continuing to avoid them. But here's what I really want you to notice. The Ten of Pentacles is showing up again. Okay, when a card repeats like this, I pay attention. Because there seems to be a question of longevity surrounding this connection. Not just, do we still have feelings, but could we actually build something that lasts? Those are very different questions. If this person comes toward you, I feel you watching what they do much more closely than what they say. Maybe once upon a time, a beautiful conversation would have been enough to reopen your heart completely. I'm not sure that's where you are anymore. You may need consistency. You may need clarity. You may need somebody who doesn't disappear when emotions become complicated. And there's nothing cold about that. It feels like experience has taught you what peace costs when you keep giving it away to uncertainty. Oh, and here's the Ace of Cups. There is tenderness around this. I don't want to ignore that. Some of you may still have genuine love for this person. Others may simply have a soft place in your heart for what the connection once represented. And for some, this Ace of Cups could even be pointing beyond this particular person, reminding you that your emotional life is larger than one relationship. That feels important. Because your future doesn't have to depend on whether somebody from the past finally gets it right. Temperance comes through as the final card, and the whole reading suddenly feels quieter. There's no need to force a decision before you have enough information. If someone reaches out, you can listen without promising anything. If they apologize, you can receive that apology without immediately reopening every door. If their actions begin showing real change, you can take your time and see what develops. And if they return, carrying exactly the same confusion that exhausted you before, you're allowed to recognize that too. Yeah, I feel like that's where your power is. You don't need to chase an explanation. You don't need to convince anyone of your value. You don't even need to decide today whether this connection deserves another chapter. Let them show you. Let time show you. The Two of Cups can be beautiful, but you're still one of the two people represented there. Your needs matter. Your emotional safety matters. Your peace matters. For some of you, this person may genuinely try to meet you differently, and perhaps there is room for something to be rebuilt slowly. For others, their return may simply give you the clarity you needed to close the door without carrying unanswered questions forward. Either way, I don't feel you standing still anymore. So if someone wants a place in your life, let their actions speak where words once fell short. You can keep your heart open without leaving it unprotected, and you can allow love to unfold without forcing yourself toward any particular ending. Whatever this connection becomes, take your time with it. Trust what feels steady, notice what feels different, and remember that the right choice for you may simply be the one that allows your heart to remain peaceful while it makes it.